Welcome to Pro Football Now. It's week 15 and the stakes are just getting higher and higher. And as always, we start the show emptying the notebook. We have Albert Breer and Peter King of the MMQB joining us to give us all the inside info. And Peter, I'm going to start with you, starting with the big news of the week. Carson Wentz, torn ACL, done for the year. Just terrible news there for him, for Philadelphia. What are you hearing in terms of the team reaction to this news?
Well, Amy, our Jenny Varentis was out in Los Angeles at the game on Sunday, when they beat the Rams. And I think her reaction was, a really smart one in that this is a mature team. This team has a lot of guys on it who are veteran guys. They've been around the block. They've been through injury situations before. I really don't think they're shaken up by it. I think they're disappointed for Carson Wentz without any question. But the one thing I would say is, in my opinion, the Philadelphia Eagles are an excellent running team. They average 4.6 yards a carry since Jay Ajayi has come in from Miami. He's averaged 7 yards a carry. And I don't sense any great panic at all with the Eagles.
Yeah, and I think, Peter, one of the things that's interesting about what they've done, they based a lot of their passing game on their running game. A lot of the run-pass options that they've set up to make Carson Wentz comfortable have done a lot to develop the running game. And and if you want to take that to another level, you just look at how they're built through the lines of scrimmage. They've invested so much on that offensive line. And even with Jason Peters down, they've been solid up there. And then on the defensive line, you look at the investment that they've made with guys like Fletcher Cox and Chris Long and Vinnie Curry and Brandon Graham. It's a very, very sturdy team. And so they're built to deal with injuries. It's a big one. It's a quarterback. But certainly with what Peter said about the running game and how they're built through the lines of scrimmage, I think they're equipped to deal with injuries.
I think that's a really interesting point, that they have so many pieces there now that Nick Foles is in a really good position to succeed. Albert, I'll start with you. Do you see the team making any adjustments for him to put him in an even better position?
Well, he's not as athletic as Carson Wentz is. And so some of the concepts in the run game that they were running with Carson Wentz, they're not going to be able to run for Nick Foles. That said, Nick Foles was pretty effective running Chip Kelly's offense 3-4 years ago. He had 27 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions in a single season for Chip. And so it's not like these concepts are foreign to him. I don't think he's going to be as effective as Carson Wentz was running them, because who would be? The offense is built for Carson Wentz. But I certainly think that he's got the experience in that sort of system to be effective.
Peter, what are you thinking about any adjustments for Nick Foles, or what are they going to get in him moving forward?
No, I really think they're going to try to run the ball more than they have so far this year. They've been very successful at it. I don't think there's any deep, dark secret when you look at the Eagles. They don't want to expose Nick Foles. He's a good backup quarterback who's had one good year as a starter, and otherwise he's been a mediocre guy. So I think they don't want to expose him, and they're going to lean a lot on Blount, Clement, and Ajayi down the stretch as they try to win home field in the NFC.
We talk about the stakes continuing to get higher, playoff implications almost every game. Emotions are high. We saw that perfect example at the end of that Seahawks-Jags game. Albert, I know you have some strong feelings about this one. Two ejections, 4 personal fouls, 0 suspensions. When the league took another look, they decided no player should be suspended about this. What did they see there?
I just think, they said, of course, that Jefferson was provoked by the fans and that Michael Bennett was swiping at the ball. I think that those aren't suitable excuses. I don't think you ever attempt to go into the stands no matter what happens. That's not excusing what the fans did. What they did was reprehensible, no question about it. And Michael Bennett, this isn't his first rodeo. He was on Greg Schiano's team in 2012 when the same sort of situation arose at MetLife Stadium, and there was the whole dust-up with Eli Manning and the Giants over whether or not they should be diving at the ball during a kneel down. And so I don't think there's a suitable excuse for either of those players, and I don't think there's enough consistency on the part of the league here. Look, last week the problem with Rob Gronkowski's suspension, the reason why people saw the one-game suspension is not enough, is because they were comparing it against Iloka and Smith-Schuster. Those infractions happened during play. And the reason those guys were suspended was because it was an ugly night for the league. And so that was the reason why you ding those guys a game. Now, obviously, Iloka's was overturned. And then Gronkowski, of course, is because it's outside the context of a play. In this situation, you've got both elements. these incidents happened outside the context of play, and it was an ugly situation for the league. And so I don't know how you can be consistent and say that both Quentin Jefferson and Michael Bennett shouldn't have been suspended.
It does seem incredibly inconsistent. Peter, I'm wondering if you have heard from any players what they think about this decision to have no suspensions here. Do they think it's unfair? What's the player reaction here?
Yeah, I did talk to Calais Campbell on my podcast this week of the Jaguars, and I think he felt like there was a method to the Seahawks madness, not only sort of trying to get under Jacksonville's skin, but possibly doing something to make sure that the clock would be affected by what happened, and clock stoppages would have benefited the Seahawks. I don't know if that's true or not, but I would agree with Albert. I think the NFL really has to draw a line in the sand with this. And if I were the NFL, I would think about a suspension for Michael Bennett, because with player safety being so incredibly important now, you just can't allow these things to go unchecked.
Peter, thank you for the time. Albert, thanks as well for all the insight. We are going to send it over to our friends at Pro Football Focus for this week's Well Actually on Casey Hayward.
I'm Steve Palazzolo.
And I'm Sam Monson. We are Pro Football Focus, and this is Well Actually.
Sam, there's a changing of the guard at the cornerback position in 2017. Patrick Peterson, Jalen Ramsey, Marshawn Lattimore, Xavier Rhodes, and others all vying for the title of best corner in the game. But well, actually, the best corner in football right now plays for the Los Angeles Chargers. It's number 26, Casey Hayward.
Casey Hayward seems to have spent his entire career underappreciated, but he's been a PFF star right since the get-go. Back in 2012, he put together the greatest rookie cornerback season we've seen in the past decade of grading. His coverage numbers that season were absolutely absurd. Covering the slot for the Packers, he didn't allow a single touchdown all season long and gave up a passer rating of just 31.1 when targeted, which is 8.5 points lower than if the quarterback had just taken the ball and thrown it in the dirt every single play.
Your favorite stat.
Absolutely. But this wasn't just one of the best rookie performances we've seen from any cornerback. This is one of the few seasons we've seen that can genuinely rival that incredible 2009 season from Darrelle Revis. Hayward then got hurt in his second year, didn't play as much that year. They tried him outside in 2014 and 2015, ultimately decided he couldn't play there, despite him playing well every time they asked him to do it, and then eventually let him walk in free agency, where he signed with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, it seemed like the Packers knew that he was going to be out the door. They drafted his replacements in 2015. The Chargers swoop in, sign him to a modest 3-year, $15 million contract, 31st highest contract for any corner in the NFL, and the Chargers certainly gotten their money's worth. He steps in last year. They let him play on the outside, and he puts up an 88.4 PFF grade. That's 6th best in the NFL, the 4th best passer rating allowed at 54.3. And then this year he's been even better, top-graded corner at PFF this year, forced an incompletion on 31.7% of his targets. That's 3rd best in the entire league. And again, passer rating against a 51.3. That's 4th best in the league. So we're talking about Hayward already has that success in the slot under his belt. Doesn't matter. He moves to the outside, still successful, and right now the best corner in the NFL.
And with Jason Verrett injured, he hasn't just been starting outside. He's been their number 1 corner for most of the past 2 seasons. And if you look at the list of receivers he's done it up against this year, it's an incredible who's who. Amari Cooper, Des Bryant, Odell Beckham, Demaryius Thomas twice, Tyreek Hill, Alshon Jeffrey, Josh Gordon after he came back for the Cleveland Browns. This is an incredible list of guys he's gone up against and shut them almost all down. The largest amount of receiving yards any of those receivers has gotten against him this year has been 78 from Odell Beckham, 48 of which came on 1 play. So this is a guy that's been incredible at shutting down some of the game's top receivers.
Now, when you stack up his entire career, it's an unbelievable body of work. Just dating back to 2012, he's only given up 8 touchdowns in those 6 years. He has 20 interceptions, a career passer rating against of 62.6.
Wow.
For some perspective, Deshaun Kaiser this year, passer rating of 61.2. So essentially targeting Casey Hayward, you love this analogy, targeting him essentially makes every quarterback into a struggling rookie. So it doesn't matter if he's playing in the slot or on the outside. Casey Hayward, one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and this year, the very best.
It's time now for Scott Spotlight, where we have the pleasure of being joined by Scot McCloughan, the former NFL executive and GM, is here to give us his insight. And Scott, Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota were expected to take some big steps forward this season, but they've been struggling this year. Both have missed a little time with injuries. Mariota even said after the loss to the Cardinals Sunday, "I have been hurting our team." What do you see from Mariota and Winston? Are they playing as poorly as people think?
Well, the thing about it is, I think you nailed it by saying medical. It's tough, especially for a quarterback if he's got a shoulder injury, lower body injury. They're both going to be really good players, and to come out the rookie year and do what they did was really impressive. But it's tough, and it's not just about the quarterback itself. It's about the team coming together and having chemistry and trying to get through it. But the medical stuff, it's hard. And no one knows, unless you're in the building, how hurt they really are. But they want to play, and I really feel positive about them going forward. If I was a general manager of a team, I'd love to have either one of those guys on my roster, hands down.
Well, Scott, if you were the GM of either one of these teams, what would you do to help them take some steps forward and put them in a position to succeed?
Well, it's just adding players in free agency, which is a tool to work with, pro free agency, and then draft well. Draft football players, that it doesn't matter. Everything's quarterback. It's just the offense. No, you got a quarterback out on defense and special teams as well. You just got to add good football players where the whole package comes together. And all of a sudden now you have a guy that has confidence in himself, and they're not going to be great every day. I mean, look at last night with Brady. It happens. But had the confidence to know that we can go out there and win each week. And I got people around me, not just on offense, but defense and special teams. They're going to help us win. And that's what it's all about. That's why he carried 53 guys. That's why he got 46 on Sunday.
All right, well, we're talking here about quarterback injuries. There's no bigger quarterback injury in the NFL in 2017 than Aaron Rodgers. Broke his collarbone back in October. And Scott, I'm wondering how a general manager in this sort of situation, when the player gets close and Rodgers is close, balances the short-term goals of the team. You've got a player who's into his mid-30s now. Clearly, you are in a championship window versus the long-term health of the player.
Yeah, you got to talk to the player first, because he's been around long enough where you know him as a person and you know how he feels, what's right and wrong with him physically. He wants to play. He's a competitive guy. He's had success. He wants more success. But also, you got, like you said, going forward, okay, so if we put him out there now, you go to the head coach, you go to the owner and say, listen, he wants to play. The doctors feel he's healthy enough to play. Then you got to understand you might be taking a chance with the future. But also, you want to win, and I know Aaron. I know him well. That was my first, draft when I was in San Fran and sat with him probably 4 or 5 times at dinner and all that. That he wants to play, and but all of a sudden, if Mike, the head coach McCarthy, thinks that listen, there's not a chance we might make the playoffs, then shut it down. But if you feel like, listen, we got a chance to make this, we got a chance to make a run here, then you bring him back. But it all depends on the doctors. Aaron's going to say, yes, I'm going. But the doctors have to be the ones that say, listen, he's cleared to go.
Well, you say that, Scott. Like, how often were you in a position where you had to protect a player against himself?
Quite a few times, but because they're so competitive, and they want to be out there. And when they're not out there, they don't feel part of the team. You sit on the sideline, you're not playing, you're not in pads, you're in your sweatshirt, you're in sweats, you got tennis shoes on. And it's tough for guys like Aaron that are so successful and so competitive, that they want to be out there. That's their livelihood. That's what they do, so you guys, that's what's so important, to have a good relationship between the GM, the player, the head coach, ownership, and doctors, because you got to communicate. And you got to say, listen, this is the best for him or the worst for him.
Scott, in a year of brutal quarterback injuries, we saw Carson Wentz go down with that torn ACL over the weekend. Just horrible news there for those guys in Philly. What do you see the projection for the team moving forward without him?
Well, you know what? Foles will be okay. He's a solid number 2, and the reason why he got picked where he got picked, and he's had some success. It's tough. But the thing about that team is the fact that it is a team. You know, the defense and special teams, you know, they're going to fight and fight and fight. Now you lose, you know, your quarterback that's had a phenomenal year and is going the right direction to possibly MVP, but it happens. And that's what's so unique about this time of year is there's injuries, you know, and that's something, that's why it's so important to draft well. That's why it's so important to sign, you know, pro free agents in the offseason for depth, you know, and you got to build yourself with that, because at any play, at any time, your best player can go down. And he did, you know, and it was kind of a freak thing, but, you know, you got to keep going. No one feels sorry for you. No one's going to care, you know, that you lost your starting quarterback. They're going to come try and beat your tail. So that's why depth's so important, but it's a tough thing. Very tough. You lose your starting quarterback that's playing that well.
Scott, you mentioned timing too here, right? So you never want to lose your starting quarterback, but does the fact that it's happening in mid-December, close to the end of the season with the playoffs right there, does that make it worse for the Eagles? Does that make it more challenging for the Eagles to try to adjust before the playoffs?
I don't think it makes it more challenging. I just think you got a game plan, like in the offseason to the draft and all that stuff, and how you build the roster. I mean, it could happen week 2, could happen week 12, you know, whatever. It's just part of the game. And you have to always be thinking, okay, listen, I don't want to talk about it. I'll knock on wood, because I don't want to lose our starting quarterback, our starting running back, our best receiver, our best corner, our best pass rusher. But you always got a game plan as a general manager, thinking ahead. What happens if it does happen? You know, and Simon Foles was great because he's done it. You know, I'm not saying he's been great, but he's played NFL football games in the regular season. You know, and I think that's a huge positive, because he's not going to walk out there and have, I haven't done this. What's going to happen here? He's been there and done it, and hasn't had a lot of success, but still he's been there and fought through it, and that's why he's the guy now. He's the number 2 there, and now he's playing.
Scott, as always, we appreciate your time and your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys very much.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Welcome to the Executive Suite. I'm the fantasy executive, Corey Parson. With week 15 of the NFL season upon us, that means it's the semifinals of the fantasy football playoffs. And Carson Wentz owners, yeah, I know it's pretty tough right now. Your guy, who was quarterback 2 on the season, is done for the season with a torn ACL. So you may need to stream a quarterback this week, or even more importantly, you may need to block your opponent from getting a quarterback to stream this week. Here's a couple options that are likely on the waiver wire that you can look to. Let's start with Jimmy Garoppolo, San Francisco 49ers quarterback. In 2 games as the Niners starter, Jimmy G has put up some nice fantasy numbers. He has only thrown 1 touchdown pass, but has games of 293 and 334 yards passing. In week 15, Jimmy G goes up against the Titans secondary. The Titans give up an average of over 16 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and opposing passing attacks have thrown 22 touchdown passes versus the Titans, which is 8th most in the NFL. Garoppolo hasn't put up huge fantasy weeks yet, but the points will come against the leaky Titans defense. Another quarterback you can look to is Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles is QB 15 on the season, and he is likely on your waiver wire. In his last 7 games, Bortles has thrown 8 touchdown passes and has 5 games with over 250 yards passing. Week 15 brings a tasty matchup versus the Texans secondary that has allowed 24 passing touchdowns, which is tied for 5th most in the NFL. It will be easy for Bortles to throw 2 touchdowns and over 250 yards passing in Week 15. Our symmetric rising star for Week 15 is San Francisco 49er wideout Marquise Goodwin. Since Jimmy Garoppolo has taken over as starting QB for the Niners, Marquise Goodwin has been a fantasy asset. Goodwin has 14 receptions on 20 targets. He also has 205 yards receiving in his last 2 games. In Week 15, Goodwin goes up against his Titans secondary that's 17th in average fantasy points against wideouts. Goodwin is a must start in the next round of the fantasy playoffs.
Thanks, Corey. This is Last Call, and the carnage of the Jimmy Haslam era in Cleveland hasn't just claimed scouts or coaches or a tortured fan base. It has, too, taken hostage the future of players in a way that perfectly illustrates the talent development problem that exists in 2017 across the NFL. And I'm going to give you a name that you may never have heard of to prove it. That's Tank Carter, and you'll have to follow me here. After a star-studded career at TCU, Carter went in the 5th round of the 2012 draft to Buffalo. He was waived on cutdown weekend and claimed by the Browns. And that's where Carter started to live the football life of a journeyman without ever having to call the movers. So that September, Carter was acquired by GM Tom Heckert and played for head coach Pat Shurmur, defensive coordinator Dick Duron, and linebackers coach Billy Davis. All were fired after the season. And in came Joe Banner and Mike Lombardi to hire Rob Chudzinski, Ray Horton, and Ken Flagel. A year later, the Browns were pressing reset again. And 2 years after that, Carter saw a third overhaul of the football operation. At the time, he was headed into his 5th NFL season, and that was all ahead of last week's decision to fire Sashi Brown and bring in John Dorsey. If you're keeping score at home, Dorsey is the 5th man to front the Browns scouting operation, joining Heckert, Banner, Farmer, and Brown in Carter's 6 years. He's had 4 head coaches, he's had 4 defensive coordinators, including one, Ray Horton, who served twice, first in 2013, then in 2016, and he's had 5 position coaches. Now, let's go back to his draft year, 2012. There was one 5th rounder in Carter's class who became a Pro Bowler. That's Josh Norman. And Norman had a grand total of 1 head coach, 1 defensive coordinator, and 1 position coach in his 4 years in Carolina, which set up a huge payday in Washington. The staff, because they knew him and they'd invested in him, rode out some early bumps, stuck with it, and wound up with one of the best corners in football. Carter's not alone either, and it's not just guys who were drafted down the line. Cleveland's 2015 first-rounder, Danny Shelton, is now in his 3rd personnel czar, 2nd head coach, 3rd defensive coordinator, and 3rd defensive line coach in 3 years. And how about this? Shelton is the only first-round pick, other than Joe Thomas, left on the roster that predates Hugh Jackson, who's been in charge for 23 months. And again, I'm not here to tell you Carter would have wound up being a Norman-level player if he went somewhere with some semblance of stability. But there's no question he'd have had a much better shot.